Yonaguni Monument. Have you ever stared down at the surface of the ocean and quietly wondered, what if, down there, lies the memory of a civilization long forgotten? I want you to imagine this: a thriving, ancient world-breathing building right beneath the waves. Then something happened. A great flood, massive shift of the earth, and just like that, vanished. When I first set foot in the southern seas of Japan, where the Ryukyu Islands stretch quietly into the Pacific, I didn't expect what I'd find wouldn't be on land, but beneath the water. It's called the Yonaguni Monument, a massive stone structure resting silently 25 meters below the surface, just a few hundred meters off the coast of Yonaguni. But the strange thing is, what I saw underwater didn't look like anything natural I'd ever studied before. Imagine a stone staircase more than 150 meters long, cut with edges so sharp, so precise, it feels almost unnatural. Huge stone slabs aligned like the steps of an ancient temple. Passages that look like corridors, and a section that resembles a shattered doorway. Some divers even point to what appears to be a weathered human head, half lion, half person-like. Someone once tried to leave a message for those who came after. Today, the archaeological world is still deeply divided. Geologist Professor Masaki Kimura, for example, is convinced this is man-made, built around 10,000 years ago, long before the Egyptians even dreamt of their pyramids. He claims the stones show signs of cutting, perfect right angles, drainage channels, even pathways beneath the structure. To him, it's the fingerprint of a long-lost civilization. But others argue it's all natural, just sedimentary rock, eroded over thousands of years by water and time. And honestly, nature can create some pretty bizarre shapes, sometimes. All it takes is a little imagination, and we start seeing what we want to see. I don't take sides, but here's what I do believe. When you dive beneath Yonaguni, you don't just see stone, you feel something. I once spoke with a diver, someone who'd gone down there more than 50 times. He told me, every time I'm down there, I don't just see rock, I see questions. A lot of questions. And maybe that's what makes Yonaguni so powerful. It doesn't hand you answers. It forces you to ask. If there really was a civilization here, who were they? What did they build beneath the sea? Most importantly, what happened that swallowed their entire world? Maybe the waves took everything. Or maybe Yonaguni isn't a ruin. Maybe it's a message. A voice from the ocean floor whispering to modern humanity. We were here. We knew. And then we disappeared. The only question now is, are you ready to listen? Yonaguni, an unsolved mystery, or a warning for the future? Teotihuacan. Some cities were built for people to live in, but some were built for people to look up to. And Teotihuacan, rising in the highlands of Mexico, was never just a place for daily life. It was a place to summon the gods with stone, with blood, and with secrets no one has fully unraveled. I once stood atop the Pyramid of the Sun, under the burning midday sun of Mexico's Central Plateau. All around me stretched a city spanning over 20 square kilometers. Laid out with such perfect geometry, you'd think it was planned by NASA engineers. But no, this city was built over 2,000 years ago. There are no written records, no portraits of its builders. And yet, they created a super-city capable of housing up to 200,000 people, one of the largest cities in the ancient world. The Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, Quetzalcoatl. These aren't just piles of stone. They're aligned with astonishing astronomical precision, especially to solar and lunar phenomena, like yin and yang. I'm right in the heart of the city is the Avenue of the Dead, a perfectly straight road stretching 4 kilometers. Splitting the city into 2 poles. Archaeologists have found burial chambers beneath the pyramids, containing liquid mercury, obsidian figurines, and walls inlaid with materials that shimmer like starlight. A model of the universe, could this be? A sacred map for the soul to walk from life to death? But here's the twist. The Aztecs didn't build Teotihuacan. They discovered it centuries later, abandoned, silent, and powerful. And they gave it a name that still sends chills down your spine. Teotihuacan, the place where humans become gods. A local man once told me, we didn't build it. We just live in its shadow. That line gave me goosebumps. Can you imagine that? living next to a majestic, sprawling city, and no one knows who made it. It's like living on the edge of a dream, beautiful, but never truly yours. People always ask me, how could an ancient civilization build something this massive without machines? I don't have a solid answer, but I do know this. When humans believe in something greater than themselves, they can build things that defy logic. Teotihuacan was born of faith, whether it was faith in gods, the cosmos, or the cycle of rebirth. This city was a declaration. Carved in stone, we were here, we believed, and we built. But Teotihuacan still holds its secrets. Beneath the ground, there are still tunnels waiting to be uncovered. On the walls, symbols that no one has fully decoded. And inside each of us, questions we're still afraid to ask. But maybe one day, you'll find yourself standing in the middle of the Avenue of the Dead, looking straight up at the Pyramid of the Sun. And in that moment, you might just feel. This city wasn't built for the old world. It was built for the one yet to come. Teotihuacan isn't a relic. It's a question, a doorway. Are you ready to step through? Chaco Canyon? There are places in this world where, the moment you step foot in them, time just seems to stop. It's not because they're empty, but because you can feel something ancient, silent, watching. Chaco Canyon, tucked deep in the New Mexico desert, is one of those places. I still remember the first time I stood in the middle of Chaco. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't the sun, it was something else. That strange, still moment between silence and anticipation that gave me chills. Chaco doesn't look like any other ancient site in the Americas. It's not towering like the Maya pyramids. It's not mystical like the Celtic stone circles. It's low, grounded, contemplative. This was once the center of a brilliant culture, the ancestral Pueblones, around 1,000 years ago. They left no writing, but they left behind walls. Imagine this. An entire network of great houses, multi-story stone buildings with over 600 rooms, dozens of kivas, built entirely by hand, right in the desert, all aligned with the sunrises, sunsets, and even the moon, in the wildest part. They didn't have telescopes, but they still knew when the solstices came, and they carved that knowledge into stone. One of the most mind-blowing features, the sun dagger. On the summer solstice, sunlight passes through slits in a rock wall, forming a blade of light that cuts directly through a carved spiral. Now, was that just a coincidence? Or was it a stone calendar, a place where astronomy and spirituality became one? I once spoke with a Navajo astronomer who told me, my ancestors didn't need clocks. The sky was the clock. The mountains were calendars, and light was the language of the gods. That's Chaco. Not just a city, but a cosmic measuring system built on belief. And the Pueblones weren't just star watchers, they were traders too. They brought seashells from the Pacific, copper bells from Central America, and precious turquoise from all over the region. Chaco was a hub. For commerce, for ritual, for cosmic timekeeping, laid out with city-like precision, right in the middle of a desert 1,000 years ago. And then, sometime around the year 1150, they disappeared. No wars, no obvious trail of migration. Just abandoned walls. Light, with no one left to witness it, and kivas where the sacred fires had long gone cold. Have you ever stood somewhere that made you feel like you came after? A place you don't understand, but still feels familiar? Like you'd lived there in some forgotten lifetime? Chaco doesn't try to explain itself. It simply invites you to be still. It doesn't say, figure me out. It whispers, I'm here. I once measured the sun with stone. And you? What are you measuring your time with? Chaco. Canyon where the ancients didn't live to be remembered. They lived to measure the light of the universe. Göbekli Tepe. Some things were built before writing, before the wheel, before metal even, before farming. And the strange part is it shouldn't exist, but it does. Quiet, unshaken. Like a whisper from a time when history hadn't even begun. I'm talking about Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey. The first time I saw an aerial photo of Göbekli Tepe, I thought, this has to be a fantasy game render. But no, it's real. buried beneath the dry soil of southeastern Anatolia. One day in 1994, a farmer hit a strange stone while plowing his field, and after that, the entire archaeological world fell silent. Because what they found was a massive stone temple, with T-shaped pillars, carved with vivid images of animals, deities, and mysterious symbols. What archaeologists uncovered shook the foundations of everything we thought we knew about human civilization. Göbekli Tepe dates back around 11,600 years. That's before the Neolithic Age. Let that sink in. The pyramids of Giza came 7,000 years later. At that time, humans were still hunters and gatherers. No farms, no permanent homes. So who gathered hundreds of people to raise stone pillars weighing dozens of tons? Who carved lions, snakes, foxes, with stunning, precise skill and aligned them to the stars? A scholar once told me at a conference, "We didn't discover Göbekli Tepe too early. We discovered it too late." When the sun rises between the mountains, light cuts through the stone pillars as if it's awakening the soul of the universe. Each carving wasn't just art, it was language. The sun calendar, a song of life and death sung by our forgotten ancestors. And then they buried it. They deliberately filled in their own creation. Why were they trying to protect it? Was it a farewell ritual for the end of an era? I used to think our ancestors lived simple, primitive lives, a friend once told me. But after Göbekli Tepe, I started looking at them with reverence. Because when you stand among those stones, you don't just see the past. You hear a quiet call. Remember, humans built temples before they planted wheat. It's because faith came before bread. Göbekli Tepe isn't just an archaeological site. It's a symbol of ancient intelligence, of prehistoric memory, of dreams we forgot we once dreamed. And maybe the oldest thing of all isn't the stone. Maybe it's the human desire to ask, where do we belong in this universe? Göbekli Tepe, the place where humans first looked up and asked the sky. The sky, of course, didn't answer. But maybe it's not the sky that needs to speak. Maybe we're the ones who need to learn how to listen again. Great Zimbabwe. When people talk about ancient wonders, they often think of Egypt, Greece, China. But did you know right? In the heart of the African continent, there once rose a proud, towering city, built entirely of stone, no mortar, no steel, no cement, just hands and faith. That's how they built Great Zimbabwe, a place that history once tried very hard to forget. I still remember the first time I stepped into the great enclosure, the largest stone wall complex in Great Zimbabwe. Massive. Stone blocks stacked 11 meters high, stretching over 250 meters in an elliptical loop. No binding agents, and yet still standing strong. After nearly 1,000 years, as archaeologists, we often admire the engineering of great civilizations. Oh, but here, standing in front of these walls, felt something different. A quiet kind of brilliance. A dignified silence. Great Zimbabwe was built between the 11th and 15th centuries. It was once the capital of a powerful kingdom that spanned much of southern Africa. At its peak, this city may have housed up to 20,000 people, an enormous number for medieval Africa. But it wasn't just a place to live. It was a global trade hub. Archaeologists have found Chinese porcelain, Arab glass beads, and copper from the Red Sea. Proof that Great Zimbabwe once connected to the vast Indian Ocean trade network, and at the heart of it all, that stone wall. Not just a symbol of power, but a symbol of cultural identity, one that was nearly erased. Have you ever wondered why this place isn't talked about more in history books? Here's the painful truth. When Europeans first stumbled upon Great Zimbabwe, they couldn't believe that Africans had built it. So they invented false stories that it was built by Arabs or Jews or even aliens. But the truth is clear. It was the ancestors of the Shona people who built this wonder. But you see, history, when written by the victors often, forgets that others too once won... Through resilience and silence. I remember a young Zimbabwean student once told me, "We grew up hearing that Africans had no history, but when I stand in Great Zimbabwe, I know history is standing all around me. And I want you, no matter who you are or where you're from, to understand something. Identity isn't found in textbooks. It's found in stone, in soil, in the things your ancestors left, so you could keep walking forward." Today, Great Zimbabwe is more than just ruins. It's on the national flag of Zimbabwe. But even more than a symbol, it's a reminder of indigenous wisdom, of truth once buried, and of the right to tell your own story. So if one day you find yourself standing before that stone wall, don't just see it as a ruin. See it as a voice. A quiet one, yes, but one that says, we were here, we knew, and we never needed your permission to exist. Longyou caves, some mysteries in this world, aren't in history books, they're not in folk tales, not even in collective memory. And yet, they exist. Majestic, solid, unshaken. But no one remembers who built them, why, or even how. Longyou Caves in China is one of those enigmas, a wonder the world forgot. A man-made marvel so perfect, defies explanation. In 1992, a farmer in Zhejiang province was just trying to dig a fish pond, but when the water was pumped out of an old, mysterious pit, he didn't find mud. He found space. A massive underground chamber with flat walls, sharp corners, and smooth surfaces, as if cut by machines. What he and his village had accidentally unearthed was a massive network of man-made caves, thousands of years old, completely undocumented in any historical records. To this day, 24 caves have been found, all close together, yet none of them intersect. Not once. That kind of precision? It's unreal. Each cave spans hundreds of square meters, rises up to 30 meters high. And the total area excavated is over 30,000 square meters, about 5 football fields. Let that sink in. And what's stranger? The walls and ceilings are carved with tiny, perfectly parallel grooves, like someone used machinery thousands of years ago. But here's what puzzles archaeologists the most. Why is there no record of this? No scrolls, no legends, not even a local nickname passed down in folk memory. I once stood inside one of the Longyou caves. My flashlight hit the walls smooth like mirrors, and in that stillness, I could hear my own heartbeat. And I thought, we call this an ancient site, but for who? If even the descendants don't know it ever existed. Maybe it wasn't religious. Maybe it wasn't military. Maybe. It was a giant question carved into stone, left behind for someone thousands of years later to be bold enough to try and answer. When you step into Longyou, you're not discovering history. You're touching a gap in human memory. I don't know what made that culture disappear, why they chose to hide their legacy underground. But I do know this. Some mysteries don't need solving. They just need your presence, your reverence, so they can live again in our collective awareness. Today, the Longyou caves are open to tourists. People come, take photos, marvel at the scale, but next time, if you go, don't just look at the stone. Listen, because sometimes silence is the biggest story of all. Kailasa Temple. There are some structures in this world that weren't built up. They were set free from stone. No bricks were stacked. No concrete was poured. Instead, they were carved out of solid mountain. And when you see Kailasa Temple, you don't think about tools. You don't think about engineering. You just ask yourself, how is this even possible? I remember standing in Ellora, in the state of Maharashtra, India, on an early morning when mist still clung to the stone, and right in front of me stood Kailasa, a temple carved out of a single mountain, not assembled, not pieced together. No concrete foundation, just one colossal piece of rock sculpted from top to bottom, layer by layer, as if someone wasn't building it, but revealing something that had always been hidden inside. It stands 33 meters tall. That's like a 10-story building, 45 meters long, 30 meters wide, with halls, shrines, pillars, elephants, and hundreds of carvings. Gods, legends, warriors, mythology. All carved from a single, seamless rock. Some researchers say, to finish it in just 20 years. Workers would have had to remove and carve out 20 tons of rock every single day without making a single mistake. Now imagine this. No CAD drawings, no scaffolding, no modern machines, just ... people. Hands, hammers, and faith. Did they really carve a temple, or were they setting one free, like Michelangelo said? When he claimed he wasn't sculpting, but simply freeing the angel from the stone, Kailasa isn't just a temple, it's a silent answer to the question. How deep must devotion go for humans to attempt the impossible, A local man once whispered to me as he guided me through the temple. The ancients didn't build this to live in. They built it to forget themselves. And I thought, what a beautiful perspective. Because today, when we do everything to prove ourselves, Kailasa stands as proof that once upon a time, humans created their greatest work not to be admired, but to offer it to something greater than themselves. Kailasa still stands majestic, unmoving, full of grace. It doesn't shout, "Look at me," simply whispers, "I am proof," that when the human heart is still enough, it can carve through mountains. Pumapunku. Some doors don't open into rooms. They open into questions. High up on the Bolivian plateau, where the air gets thin and time seems to slow down, you'll find a place called Pumapunku, what the ancients once called the Gate of the Puma. But many of us believe it could be something else entirely. It's a doorway to a lost civilization, one whose wisdom we still can't fully comprehend. I once sat among the scattered stones of Pumapunku and thought, why here? Why these enormous blocks, some weighing over 100 tons, scattered like pieces of a shattered monument? Not broken by time, but by some ancient, forgotten impact. Pumapunku doesn't have bright, towering pyramids, no perfectly preserved temples. But maybe that's exactly what makes it so haunting. It feels like a song that was never finished. What draws researchers here is the precision, almost impossible precision. Perfect right angles, H-shaped notches that look like they were made with CNC machines. Some stone cuts are so clean you can't even slip a piece of paper between them. I remember standing with a German structural engineer. He pointed his laser tool at a stone and said, "If you told me this was pre-Incan, I'd laugh. But it's here, and now I have to rethink everything I know." We still don't understand. How did they move stones this massive, at nearly 4,000 meters above sea level? How did they cut andesite and sandstone, some of the hardest stones on Earth, with tools supposedly made of bronze or stone? And why? Why go to such precise, almost mechanical lengths in a society that didn't even have the wheel? Have you ever felt like something was cut out of history? It's not erased, just neatly removed, leaving behind only traces, but no answers. That's what Pumapunku feels like to me. Doesn't try to explain itself, just sits there, as if daring you to piece together a fragment of memory ripped from humanity's past. A local once said to me, "We don't know who our ancestors were, but we believe they knew something we'd forgotten." That line stuck with me. Maybe the better question isn't, how did they build this? Maybe it's, what did we lose? That we no longer know how to build like this? Pumapunku remains unreconstructed. Its stones still lie scattered, like someone once tried to assemble the universe, then suddenly walked away. No message left behind. It's just a giant stone Rubik's Cube, waiting for modern minds to guess at the pattern. And if one day you find yourself standing at Pumapunku with the highland wind in your ears and the sun baking the rock dry, you might see something very clearly. Progress isn't always ahead of us. Sometimes it's behind us, in a pile of ancient stone, wise, silent, and still waiting. Callanish, in the wind-swept highlands of Scotland, there's a place where some believe. If you stand in just the right spot on the night of a full moon, you might see the moonlight slither across ancient stones like a living thing, just as people saw it 5,000 years ago. Callanish stones. Not as flashy as Stonehenge, it's not as famous as the pyramids, but somehow it carries a softer whisper from the universe, one meant for those who still remember to look up. I visited Callanish on a foggy afternoon. No tourists, no voices, just gray standing stones rising from the ground, like silent gatekeepers of time, guarding an ancient secret. At first I thought Callanish was just a smaller version of Stonehenge. But when you stand in the center of the circle, with a tall central pillar surrounded by 12 satellite stones laid out like a cross, you don't feel like you're in a place built. You feel like you're in a place meant to be heard. Archaeologists say Callanish was erected around 3000 BC, contemporary with other megalithic wonders. But what sets it apart is this: it's not just aligned with the sun, ... It's aligned with the moon specifically, an 18.6-year lunar cycle that even most people today barely notice. During what's called the major lunar standstill, the moon reaches its extreme high or low on the horizon. And when it does, the moonlight glides perfectly along the stone's central axis. That's not an accident, it's not coincidence. It's a stone calendar not built to track time, but to speak with it. Our ancestors didn't build with stone alone, they built with instinct. Callanish isn't near any big city. It sits on the Isle of Lewis, a place you don't stumble upon. You have to want to find it. And maybe that's why it's still so silent, so ready to listen to the sky. A Scottish astronomer once whispered to me, as we stood in the circle's heart, "The beauty of Callanish is, it promises nothing. But if you wait long enough, it shows you everything." In today's world of Google calendars and atomic clocks, Callanish is a gentle reminder. You don't always need to know what time it is. Sometimes you just need to know it's time. I couldn't measure the moon precisely while standing there, but I measured something else, a stillness inside myself. And maybe that's the truest form of astronomy our ancestors ever practiced. Callanish doesn't speak of kings or wars or victories. It doesn't boast. It simply stands, quiet, steady, ancient, like a prayer carved in stone and sent to the moon. And maybe we modern people don't need to fully decode it. Maybe all we need is to rediscover that part of ourselves, the one still watching, still wondering, as the moonlight slips across those stones each night. Sigiriya, have you ever heard of a palace perched on top of a rock over 200 meters high, surrounded by man-made lakes, garden mazes, and a mirror wall that once reflected your face like polished glass? A place that was both a strategic fortress and a stone poem written by a lonely king? This isn't fiction. This is Sigiriya, also known as Lion Raka, mysterious gem nestled in the heart of Sri Lanka. I still remember the moment I stood at the base of that massive rock, a towering monolith rising straight from the lush plains. You can't help but look up, can't help but ask, who would ever think to build a palace where even birds need to rest before landing? And then you learn it was a king named Kashyapa, and his story, like Sigiriya itself, is beautiful, tragic, and unforgettable. In the 5th century, King Kashyapa, believed to have seized the throne by killing his own father, needed a fortress no one could reach. So he chose this lone rock nearly 660 feet tall and turned it into a palace, a citadel, and a symbol of unmatched power. What he created was astonishing. A massive staircase leading through 2 giant lion paws carved from stone, hence the name Lion Rock. Elegant water gardens below, considered one of the most advanced hydraulic systems of ancient Asia. A mirror wall so polished, it once reflected the faces of passers-by like a crystal lake. And most famously, the maidens of Sigiriya, mystical frescoes of heavenly women, whose colors still glow, untouched by time, even after 1,500 years. I once saw it in the eyes of a local Sri Lankan guide, as he quietly said, "Sigiriya isn't just a king's fortress, it's his loneliness, carved in stone." After being rejected by his people for the sin of patricide, King Kashyapa lived the rest of his life up there, at the top of the world, yet separated from it. Maybe he didn't build it only to defend himself. Maybe he built it to hide from himself and that mirror wall. Perhaps it wasn't meant to reflect others, but to help him see himself through the scars of history. Now look, most of us aren't kings, but maybe, deep down, we've all built a Sigiriya of our own, a place to hide, a place to remember, a fortress of pride masking the storm within. Sigiriya doesn't tell a story of glory. It tells of fear, redemption, and a beauty that history almost forgot. Today, when you climb those 1,200 steps to the summit, you're not just touching a rock, you're touching the emotional peak of someone who dared to rise above his fate. You don't just see ruins, you see a story no one's ever dared to say out loud. And when the wind blows through those broken corridors, you begin to understand. Some structures weren't built to last forever. They were built to remind us just how brave a human can be when fear is the only thing left. Derinkuyu, I want you to imagine this. You're living in a dry, rugged land, surrounded by volcanic rock, where summers burn like fire and winters cut to the bone. And one day, the alarm sounds. There are enemies out there. No time to pack, no time to run. And so, you're a family, your entire village, don't flee outward. You disappear beneath the earth. Not just to hide for a while, but to live there. To breathe, to pray, to survive. Down below. The first time I stepped into Derinkuyu, in Cappadocia. Turkey, I had no idea I was about to walk into an entire underground city that could shelter up to 20,000 people. Not a cave, not a few hand-dug rooms. A real city. There were living quarters, storage rooms, chapels, kitchens, stables for animals, even a school, buried more than 60 meters underground. All of it, Derinkuyu, was discovered by accident in 1963, when a man renovating his home broke down a wall and stumbled upon a tunnel. That tunnel led to a maze so dense, so complex, that even today, we've only uncovered about 8 of its 18 known levels, all connected by an intricate ventilation system. You can walk for hours in there. The passages are narrow, winding, ceilings are low, have to crouch through much of it. Then suddenly a wide chamber opens up, a domed prayer hall, ... A vertical shaft 50 meters deep for fresh air. Massive circular stone doors, hundreds of kilos that can only be closed from the inside. I once stood in one of those carved-out chambers, looked up through the air shaft, and thought, this isn't just architecture. This is ancient survival strategy at its finest. Have you ever felt the need to retreat, to disappear for a while, not because you're weak, but because you need peace to survive? Derinkuyu made me realize builders preserve culture, or warriors. Our ancestors weren't just hunters, they were people who knew when to shrink inward, to protect life, and wait for the right moment to rise again. They didn't live underground out of fear. They lived there because sometimes silence and darkness are the only safe light left to grow hope. A Turkish friend of mine once told me that's exactly what Derinkuyu is, flipped upside down. His grandmother grew up near Cappadocia. She used to say, the earth isn't a grave. Sometimes. It's a room a mother prepares for when the storm comes. And maybe a mirror image of the surface world, a place where humans didn't try to conquer nature, but learned to live within it. Today, Derinkuyu is a tourist attraction. They marvel. People visit. But few stop to ask, if they could live underground for months, what kind of faith held them together? Maybe that is the true architecture of this place. Not the stone, but the faith carved deeper than any wall ever could be. Others believe the spirals and circular patterns weren't just decoration, but a way to track the sun, the moon, the seasons, even birth cycles. And some symbols are nearly identical to those found in Peru, Chile, even the American Southwest, suggesting an ancient network of thought, spanning continents beyond language, beyond borders. Let me ask you something. If you had no written words, how would you tell the story of your life? People of Las Labradas carved it into stone right on the edge of the sea, where the waves and wind would touch it every day. It feels like their message was, we were here. We watched the sun rise from this very place. And we left our images not for people to remember us, but for the ocean to remember. One of my readers once shared with me, I went to Las Labradas after a personal heartbreak, hoping only to get away. But as I sat by a spiral carving watching the waves roll in, I cried, because I realized someone once sat here too, hurting, healing, wondering, just like me. Maybe the secret of Las Labradas isn't in what was carved, but in what comes alive in us when we stand before it. Today, Las Labradas is a protected site, but there are no roofs, no metal gates. It doesn't need them. The ocean is its guardian. And those who know how to listen to the wind through stone, they are the inheritors of its legacy. If you ever go there, don't try too hard to translate the symbols. Just place your hand on the rock and ask yourself, if I couldn't speak, what would I carve to leave behind for the future? Las Labradas isn't an open-air museum. It's a wordless diary of a people who once spoke to the sea, and the sea, still listening. Las Labradas, I want you to close your eyes. And imagine this, a quiet shoreline where the wind doesn't just carry salt. It carries stories that have never been told. On smooth black volcanic rocks, you don't see cracks from nature. You see carvings, etched by someone thousands of years ago, and then left in silence. This is Las Labradas, a sacred beach on the Pacific coast of Sinaloa, Mexico. A place where ancient people left behind memory, but no names. When I first stepped onto that beach, I wasn't struck by grandeur or spectacle. What hit me was the silence. You walk across the sand past these strange black stones, And suddenly you notice, etched into the rock are hundreds of figures. Spirals, animals, faces, suns, and mysterious symbols that seem to call out, "Understand myth. You can." These carvings aren't deep. They're not huge or flashy, but something in their simplicity grabs you. Because you know these aren't random scratches. They're memory, they're ritual. They're a language that's never been translated. Archaeologists believe Las Labradas may date back between 2,500 and 1,200 years ago, created by indigenous peoples from northwestern Mexico.
Oh, no written records.
No bones. Just stone and sea. And between them, a quiet conversation that's lasted millennia. Some scholars think these carvings marked rituals to see gods, since many are placed right where the tide rises and falls like breath. Palpa glyphs in the dry deserts of southern Peru. There's a place where, if you're standing on the ground, you see nothing. But once you rise into the air, like an ancient bird soaring overhead, huge shapes begin to appear. People, stars, spirals, sun gods, hands reaching upward, eyes gazing out into the universe.
Oh.
They call them the Palpa glyphs, often referred to as the forgotten brother of the Nazca lines. But to me, they're more than just drawings. They're ancient prayers sent skyward, grounded deep in the earth. I once had the chance to fly in a tiny plane over Palpa, as the morning sun swept across the ridges. Those mysterious figures slowly emerged, like an ancient letter being unfolded by light. And I realized, what makes Palpa special isn't just its size. It's the spiritual depth etched into its hills. Unlike the Nazca lines, which are mostly drawn on flat plains, the Palpa glyphs are carved into hillsides. That means they weren't just made for the gods in the sky. They were also meant to be seen by people on earth, a kind of dual language of symbols, one that speaks both up and inward. Researchers believe the glyphs were created by the Paracas culture, a powerful civilization that flourished here from around 500 BCE to 200 CE. Before the Nazca even appeared, these aren't just shapes. Include human figures with raised arms, radiant suns, spirals, stars, and beings that look like they're mid-ritual. Some in positions that suggest movement, offering, or communication. One of the most iconic is the Starman, a figure with arms outstretched, standing tall, as if calling out to the heavens above. Many scholars think these glyphs represent ceremonies for agriculture, astronomy, or perhaps messages to visitors from above. And I often wonder, if a civilization knew it might one day be forgotten, what would it choose to leave behind? A monument, statue, or a simple shape so massive the sky itself could see it, and so clear that people below would understand? We were here. Palpa feels like a bridge between two worlds, sky and earth, the living and the divine, the past and the present. There are no books, no scrolls, just lines. But those lines are enough to make us stop and ask, why did they draw these? And who did they hope would see them? A young archaeology student once said to me, "I think the people of Palpa didn't just want to be remembered. They wanted to be understood." And I've never stopped thinking about that. Because in our modern world where we document everything from breakfast to bedtime dreams, our ancestors had nothing but earth, rock, and open sky. And they used the ground to write, the wind to carry, and the light to illuminate what they believed. Today, Palpa isn't as well known as Nazca, and maybe that's part of its power. No crowds, no flash, no over-explained plaques, just rocks, symbols, and you. So if you ever stand there on that quiet ridge, don't try to understand it right away. Stand still, look up at the sky, then look back at the earth beneath your feet. And maybe you'll realize they didn't draw to be seen, they drew to be heard. The Palpa glyphs weren't messages for their time. They were signals sent forward into the future, waiting for someone in your time to finally listen. Nabta Playa, before the pyramids of Giza, before England's famous Stonehenge, before history even began with writing, there was a place where humans looked up at the sky, arranged stones by the path of the sun, and maybe asked questions we still don't know how to answer. That place is Nabta Playa, a stone circle in the middle of the Nubian desert, southern Egypt. And perhaps It's the oldest astronomical calendar ever built by humankind. I once stood at Nabta just before sunrise. The desert wind was light, not a soul in sight. But still, I felt watched, not by someone nearby, but by something far, far beyond. I looked at the standing stones, some as tall as a person, positioned not randomly, but aligned precisely to where the sun rises on the summer solstice. Have you ever felt like you weren't standing at an archaeological site, but inside a cosmic timepiece? Nabta Playa took shape between 10,000 and 6,000 years ago, when this desert was still a lush green savanna, with lakes, trees, and nomadic herders. They had no metal, no carts, but they had ... astronomy. Researchers found a ring of stones carefully arranged to predict the solstice and the coming of rains, which meant survival for a people living by the seasons. Some of these stones, over 2 tons in weight, were moved and set upright using primitive tools, yet with mind-blowing precision. Professor Fred Wendorf, who led the excavation at Nabta, once said, "If you think astronomy began in ancient Egypt, think again. Nabta came before, and it runs much deeper." I often ask my students, when you live in the desert, what do you look at? Maybe the sand, the rocks, the road, but our ancestors looked up. They didn't just find Polaris to guide them. They watched the skies, they saw patterns, and they carved those patterns into stone. To me, Nabta Playa isn't a monument. It's a prayer etched into time. A young astronomer once told me, when I first read about Nabta Playa, I cried, because I realized, long before telescopes, my ancestors looked up at the same sky I do, and they saw the same things. Have you ever thought, when you look up at the stars, you're not just admiring beauty? You're joining a conversation that's been going on for tens of thousands of years, connecting you with people who once lived, loved, and feared. Just like you, only they wrote their thoughts in stone. Today, most of Nabta Playa still lies buried beneath the sand. There are no crowds, no fancy exhibitions. It's just stones, sand, and the patience of the universe. But if one day you find yourself there, and you stand in the center of the circle on the summer solstice, you might witness something quiet, something small, something barely visible, but powerful enough to change how you see your ancestors. They weren't primitive. They were the first to listen to time itself. Nabta Playa isn't a relic. It's an ancient whisper from the sky, etched into the earth, waiting for someone in the future to understand. That someone might just be you. Palpa glyphs its time to bring this journey to a close, a journey that's taken us across 14 magnificent human creations. From underground cities and stone circles, to temples carved out of mountaintops, and our final stop quite fittingly brings us back to a dry plateau where the earth still whispers to the sky. I'm talking about the Palpa glyphs, ancient carvings etched into the hillsides, like messages sent straight into the heavens from people whose names have faded, but whose spirits remain. You know, sometimes the simplest things last the longest. Like a whisper in the desert, if it's honest enough, it won't be blown away by the wind. It'll become part of the land. Palpa isn't as famous as the Nazca lines. You won't find it in textbooks or documentaries. But when you stand before it or fly above it, you'll realize the ancients didn't carve to communicate. They carved to exist. Researchers believe the Palpa glyphs were made by the Paracas civilization, who once lived across southern Peru around 500 BCE. Unlike the flatline designs of Nazca, Palpa was carved on slopes, so the drawings could be seen from both the earth and the sky. Some of the shapes are just bizarre. Crowned figures, radiant suns, triple spirals, and even archaeologists have said, this isn't a message. It's a visual universe. Some wonder, was this a ceremonial site, an astronomical map, or maybe a visual will from a people who knew they were slowly fading into myth? I once joked with a student, modern people upload data to the cloud. The ancients? They left it on the rocks, but honestly, the more I think about it, the more I believe it. Palpa is just another cloud, not floating above us, but grounded beneath us. A cloud made of memories, dreams, beliefs, and longings drawn by hand, by will, by the very lives of those who created it. An old Andean spiritualist once whispered to me, "We're not trying to live forever. We just hope what we believe in outlives us." Palpa doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't need to be restored, because it already fulfilled its mission by simply being there, lying in wait, hoping someone might one day see it and understand. So let me ask you this. If you had no paper, no words, no microphone, what would you leave behind? And who would you leave it for? Samaipata sometimes, what surprises us the most isn't the giant monuments rising out of the desert, but the quiet grooves precise intentional carved onto the top of a massive flat stone. No one knows when it started. No one's quite sure what it's for. But anyone who's been to Samaipata, Bolivia, will tell you. Something here feels very wrong, yet strangely right. It's like a gateway carved in stone, as if it was meant to open up another world. I still remember the first time I laid my hand on La Roca Samaipata's sacred rock. The highland wind cut straight through me, but my chest was on fire, because what stood before me wasn't just a ruin, it was a stone map etched by sheer will.
Ow.
Along this massive rock, dozens of meters long, were parallel lines, round channels, and stairs that led absolutely nowhere. No structures, no buildings, just carvings in stone. Have you ever seen a hill? So meticulously shaved down, not for farming, not for mining, but to communicate with something beyond human logic? Samaipata, also known as Fortaleza, was once thought to be a fortress. But there are no walls, no moats, no towers. The Incas used it for ritual purposes, but the carvings at the summit, they don't belong to any known civilization. It's too abstract for the pre-Incas, too mystical for the Spanish. Some scholars believe it was an astronomical hub. Others say it was a ceremonial altar, a cosmic table to speak with the spirit world. And the most fascinating part, several of the grooves have the same curve, same depth, and point directly at the star Sirius, sacred in many ancient cultures. Have you ever entered a space where every question comes flooding in at once? I have, at Samaipata, standing between those carved channels. No signs, no guides. Just sunlight and wind gently tracing the stone's edges. I suddenly thought, if stone has memory, then this place is a book. It's hidden for thousands of years. A book without words, written in direction, pressure, and intention. Maybe it's not a place to build something new, but a place to erase yourself for a moment so you can listen. A German traveler I once met there said, "I feel like I'm being recorded not by cameras, but by the stone's energy itself." We live in a world of AI, data, and speed, but places like this don't need memory cards. They're etched into the land's memory, like a longing with no name. I can't say for sure what this was. An altar? A star map? Some ancient tool for measuring cosmic time? Maybe all three? Or maybe, like so many great things in history, it was just a human attempt to speak to something we could never fully understand. And perhaps that's the most beautiful thing about archaeology. Not to find the answers, but to keep the questions alive. Samaipata Stone Symphony, with no one playing, but always someone listening. Antikythera. It was a hot summer day in 1901. Off the coast of Greece, when a group of sponge divers stumbled upon a shipwreck deep beneath the sea. Buried in the ruins of time, they had no idea. They'd just uncovered one of the greatest technological mysteries in human history. A chunk of metal rusted, broken, falling apart, but with gears, with cogs, with calculations. They named it the Antikythera mechanism, the world's first time machine. Now I want you to picture this. A device built in the 2nd century. BC, that's over 2,000 years ago, yet it could track the movements of planets, to predict lunar and solar eclipses, and even calculate the dates of the ancient Olympics. Ever had that feeling like, hey, maybe we don't really know everything about ourselves? When I held a fragment of the Antikythera in my hand, that's exactly how I felt. Not fear, but a strange kind of gratitude, because someone long before us was thinking far ahead. At its core, the Antikythera is an ancient mechanical computer. Over 30 bronze gears meshing together with insane precision, powered by a hand crank. It shows you the position of the sun, moon, planets, all based on Babylonian astronomy. It even has a little dial for the Olympic Games every 4 years. Recently, a research team at University College London rebuilt a 3D model. Their conclusion? If this thing had been built in the Middle Ages, it'd still be a miracle. But this was built 2,000 years ago. So who made it, Archimedes? A forgotten genius? Or perhaps a whole body of knowledge lost when the Library of Alexandria burned down? People often say, the world's moving forward. We're advancing every day. But when I look at the Antikythera, I think, there were moments in history when we reached the summit, only to tumble into forgetfulness. Maybe the past wasn't behind us. Maybe it just spoke a language we've forgotten how to hear. A Greek scholar once told me, if this was a clock, then the ancient Greeks weren't just telling time. They were trying to understand time itself. And I believe he's right. The Antikythera leaves me with a question I still can't answer. One person back then could create this. How many others like them have we forgotten? And how many machines like this are still out there, not under the ocean, but hiding somewhere in the back of our untapped imagination? We built a cosmic computer before we had printers, before we had telescopes, before we had electricity, the internet, or microchips. Maybe we don't need to know all the answers. Maybe it is enough to know that great thinking isn't tied to the times we live in. It's tied to the hunger to look beyond the horizon. The Antikythera mechanism. It's not just a machine. It's a reminder that sometimes the most advanced ideas come from places we've long called ancient. Paluxy, a footprint. Not that strange, unless it's embedded in rock that's over 100 million years old. That's exactly what happened in Texas's USA, where dinosaur fossils were once the only thing anyone expected to find. Along the Paluxy River, something else appeared, but then a human footprint. Right there in the age of dinosaurs, and even more mysterious, carved into the rock, leading off into nowhere. An ancient stone ladder, the waters of the Paluxy River pull back to reveal a stone bed. Have you ever seen something that made you want to believe, but your logical mind just wouldn't let you? I have heels, toes. It happened when I set foot in Glen Rose, Texas. Each summer, where archaeologists have long studied dinosaur tracks, but mixed in with those prehistoric impressions, moving in a straight line, mimicking the human form, were footprints that looked unmistakably human, not just one, but a sequence with arches, the same size and shape as a modern human's. Scientists have offered plenty of theories. Some say it's natural erosion, just coincidence, but these prints are evenly spaced, but for memory, with no overlapping or random scatter you'd expect from chance. And then someone spotted it. The stone ladder. Deep, perfectly vertical grooves carved into the hard rock, as if someone long ago had chiseled each step, not for use, but for memory. No tools were found nearby. No official geological explanation holds up, just a ladder captured in old photographs, then quietly forgotten, drowned by time and doubt. Who once worked at the Texas Natural Science Museum told me, we just lack the courage to ask the question. A colleague of mine, not everything we don't understand is wrong. Sometimes. And the question is this. What if human history isn't linear? What if there was once a kind of human, more capable, more aware, who walked this earth long before we thought possible? I can't say for sure. But I do know this. Ladder carved in ancient stone, would I have left anything behind? Science begins with skepticism, but grows with humility, and maybe. Person who, like me, left that footprint is really an invitation to climb a little higher in our understanding. A young geologist once told me, I didn't think of dinosaurs. When I saw that ladder, I thought of myself. If I had lived 100 million years ago for someone to find, the question has stayed with me for years, because maybe they wasn't trying to prove anything. They were just someone like you, passing through life, leaving one step behind in time. Paluxy isn't just a dry riverbed in summer. It's a place where the boundary between past and present blurs. Stumble on the very same questions in the mud and the stone. And sometimes, we, our ancestors, once carried through time. Who are we? Where did we come from? Do we really understand ourselves at all? Footprint in stone, a ladder no one climbs, and a gentle reminder that we must keep moving forward, even when we're not sure if we're going up or down. Even if buried deep underground, hidden in the jungle, or lying silent in the desert, The 18 ancient sites we've explored aren't just physical ruins. They are unanswered questions carved into stone, light, and long-lost memory. They remind us. Ancient humans were never primitive. They were refined, deliberate, and sometimes new things we still can't explain today. Maybe science hasn't figured everything out yet. But each stone, each carved line, each paradox in their design is the past whispering to us. We were once far greater than you think.